Well, hi there. Greetings and welcome to this webcast. My name is Jonathan Foust. Thank you so much for tuning in. Over the next little while, next number of weeks, we are going to be kind of reviewing and exploring the 10 perfections, or the paramis. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a bit, but I'm working on some creative projects, so this talk after this webcasted meditation is going to be from about 3 or 4 years ago. And as I look back over this series, I like it. I think you might find it helpful. So before we launch, thank yous, IMCW, Insight Meditation Community of Washington, Glenn Harrison, our producer. Thank you so much for streaming this. Our mindful movement leader, Rita Moran, thank you so much. And to Ray Manioki, or we may have someone else leading for the next little while Ray is in recovery. Mindful Dialogue. Full Monday night experience, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. If you like, you can join Rita for Mindful Movement. That takes you right here, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time for the talk. And then afterward, about 10 minutes afterward, you can join Mindful Dialogue, an opportunity to connect with others, to reflect on your practice, to really just take advantage of being around like-minded people. Those links are on my website and on my Facebook page. There's Zoom links for Mindful Movement and Mindful Dialogue. As always, this is offered through the spirit of generosity. It's offered with the intent that no one's ever denied access to these practices and teachings. So if you feel inspired to support this, thank you so much. And finally, I've got a newsletter if you find that would be helpful. I've got a weekly, which gives you an update over what's coming up. And then a month or every other month, I think this year, a review of the talks of the series that I'm offering and my best photography for that period of time. So all that's there. And without further ado, let's take some time to center. Our first exploration in the 10 paramis, or the 10 perfections, is on cultivating generosity. So with that, you might close your eyes and you might offer a spirit of generosity to yourself. You're giving yourself this gift of slowing down, of paying attention. You might want to stretch, move, adjust your posture in any way that it feels good. If you like, you can close your eyes or cast your eyes down. And in your own way now, take this time to slow down your breath. You might find it helpful to match the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath, counting to 4 on the inhalation, counting to 4 on the exhalation. And as you do so, just track the effect. How does slowing down and focusing on controlling your breath shift your attention? How does it shift the quality of your experience? You may find that this can cultivate a sense of calm, a sense of arriving. And as we continue for just the next minute here, you might honor this as a concentration technique. So when you notice your mind wandering, you just bring it right back, re-engage. Notice where you feel the breath. This is all part of the practice of gathering attention. Noticing when the mind has wandered and consciously calling it back. And now you might, if it's helpful, you can stay with this slow, controlled breath, or if you prefer, you can let your breath relax. Release any control of your breathing and just notice right now where you feel the breath the most predominant inside. And as you relax the breath, you'll notice how the body breathes by itself. Is it possible to find some quality of pleasure here? The pleasure of the in-breath and the out-breath. As a way of deepening this sense of here and now, you might sense from the inside out your forehead. Can you feel your forehead smooth? And just track any felt sense of relaxation. When you bring your attention to the muscles around your eyes, is it possible to soften, to feel? And sensing now the muscles of the face, you might kind of scrunch up the muscles of your face, make your face into a raisin, and then relax. Let all the micro expressions on your face melt away. And feeling now the inside of your mouth. In particular, you might begin by relaxing your tongue. Let your tongue relax and fill your lower jaw. How intimately can you feel this felt sense of relaxing inside the mouth? Perhaps even sensing the root of the tongue. Perhaps a slackening of the jaw. Letting your awareness now spread out through the shoulders, feeling the shoulder joints and the shoulder blades, and sensing down the length of the arms, down through the elbows, down through the wrists. Sensing down through the elbows. Down through the palms of the hands. And what could relax or soften right now? As you feel the breath, just notice the movement in the chest and in the belly. Is it possible to relax on the out-breath as you feel the chest and the belly? And sensing through the lower back, the buttocks, floor of the pelvis. And sensing now down the length of the legs from the hip joints down through the knees. The knees down through the ankles. the tops of the feet and the toes. Soles of the feet and the heels. Sensing from the crown of the head down to the soles of the feet. Is there anything here that could soften or relax or let go even more? You might notice now where you feel the breath. And sense who you are as the observer of what is present and what is changing. You might explore the following questions. And what could soften inside right now? How intimately can you feel the breath right now? Can you sense who you are as the observer? Noticing what is present and noticing what is changing. And is it possible to let things be just as they are right now? You might very gently now lengthen the inhalation, and on the exhalation, relax and feel. Letting your body stretch and move in any way that feels good for you. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. No hurry, no rush. Feel free to remain with them closed if you like. The following talk is on the power of generosity. And it's interesting to note that this is the very first talk of these 10 perfections. It's the lead. How to be generous to yourself, and how cultivating a quality of generosity sets the stage for true and deep awakening. There's a lot more I can say about it now, but in a few minutes I'm going to say a lot about it. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you find the following talk on cultivating generosity to be helpful in your practice. Many, many blessings. A local United Way office realized that it had never received a donation from the town's most successful lawyer. The person in charge of contributions called the lawyer to persuade him to contribute. And she said this. She said, "Our research shows that out of a yearly income of at least $500,000, you have not given a penny to charity. Wouldn't you like to give some back to the community?" The lawyer mulled this over for a moment, and then this is what the lawyer said. "First, did your research also show that my mother is dying after a long illness and has medical bills that are several times her annual income?" Well, the United Way rep was a little startled and said, no. But then the lawyer went on and said, "Or that my brother, a disabled veteran, is blind and confined to a wheelchair?" The United Way started kind of stammering an apology, but the lawyer interrupted her and said, "Or that my sister's husband died in a traffic accident, leaving her penniless with 3 children?" Well, the United Way rep was completely humiliated and started to say, "Look, I had no idea." But the lawyer was on a roll and cut her off again. And the lawyer said, "So, if I didn't give any money to them, why should I give any money to you?" Last week, I talked at some length about Ebenezer Scrooge and Ebenezer Scrooge's awakening, and the result of his awakening being opening into appreciation, ecstatic aliveness, and generosity. But here's a real life example, and I'm just going to read this because it's pretty cool. It's about the very first person who reached the status of a billionaire. And then what happened? This is about John D. Rockefeller. At the age of 23, he'd become a millionaire. And by the age of 50, a billionaire. Every decision, attitude, and relationship was tailored to create his personal power and wealth. But 3 years later, at the age of 53, he became ill. His entire body became racked with pain, and he lost all the hair on his head. In complete agony, the world's only billionaire could buy anything he wanted, but he could only digest milk and crackers. An associate wrote, he could not sleep, would not smile, and nothing in life meant anything to him. His personal, highly skilled physicians predicted he would die within a year, and that year passed agonizingly slow. As he approached death, he awoke one morning with the vague remembrances of a dream. And he could barely recall the dream, but he knew it had something to do with not being able to take any of his success with him into the next world. The man who could control the business world suddenly realized he was not in control of his own life. He was left with a choice. He called his attorneys, accountants, and managers and announced that he wanted to channel his assets to hospitals, research, and mission work. And on that day, John D. Rockefeller established his foundation. This new direction eventually led to the discovery of penicillin, cures for strains of malaria, tuberculosis, and diphtheria. A list of discoveries resulting from his choice is enormous, but perhaps the most amazing part of Rockefeller's story is that the moment he began to give back a portion of all that he had earned, his body's chemistry was altered so significantly that he got better. It looked as if he would die at 53, but he lived to be 98. Rockefeller learned gratitude and gave back from his wealth, and doing so, it made him whole. It's one thing to be healed, it's another to be made whole. That's a pretty cool story. I find that to be pretty inspiring. This is the first of a series of talks on what are called the 10 perfections, or the 10 paramis. The classic translation of the word parami or paramita is perfection or excellence. The word para means beyond, and mita can mean that which has arrived. So it's beyond, it's going beyond. And the word perfection implies that anything other than that is bad. And I really do not like the title of the 10 perfections. It's just such a setup. Do we really need to perfect anything? Isn't it ultimately true that everything right here is perfect as it is? So I like to think of these, and they're awesome teachings. I'm really looking forward to sharing them with you. But I like to think them as these qualities we can cultivate. They're sort of facets of the self that you can polish. And in that polishing, it points toward wakefulness, aliveness, whatever words resonate for you. One perspective on these teachings of the 10 paramis is that they were added after the core teachings of the Buddha in the Pali Canon as a way to help people engage with the teachings. So the first that I'm going to be talking about today is dana, which is generosity, the giving of oneself, but a little preview of what's to come. These are all qualities that are really helpful to reflect on as ways that you can cultivate and kind of polish the conditioned self to reflect more of the unconditioned self. We'll be exploring sila, which is virtue or morality, nekama, which is renunciation, that is to say, letting go of that which you don't need to focus on what you want, pana, which is cultivating wisdom and insight, virya, which is cultivating energy and diligence and vigor, kanta, which is cultivating patience and tolerance and acceptance, satya, which is about cultivating truth, the capacity to be brutally honest with yourself. We'll also explore adhitan, which is determination and resolution, and metta, cultivating loving kindness. And the 10th parami is upekkha, cultivating serenity and equanimity. So tonight is about cultivating a generous heart. And what I'd like to talk about is first what the Buddha allegedly said about generosity. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the science behind generosity and how the practice of generosity, the contemplation of generosity, can very quite reliably shift your consciousness. Third, I'd like to talk about completing the cycle of generosity. It's one thing to give, it's another to train yourself to receive. And fourth, contemplation of action, where we'll explore contemplating one generous act and what that means for you. So, I'm always struck by the teachings around generosity, because my concept of how the Buddha practiced meditation was really quite arduous. And you may be familiar with the story of the Buddha who kind of went off to practice, and the first sort of phase of his practice was austerities. Full-time, relentless focus, intense fasting, denying the body to try to access kind of the transcendent self. He then went on to explore the middle way, finding balance and so forth. But we tend to think, or at least I tend to think of a lot of this practice of meditation or mindfulness as being quite arduous, using a lot of focus, a lot of dedication. And to me, that sort of invokes a sense of it being a little bit grim, like denying the body to move toward what you want. But what surprised me is that, like the first training the Buddha gave after awakening, again, allegedly, this is a couple thousand years ago, was about generosity. After all that work of exploring the conditioned self and opening to the unconditioned self and the exploration of what lies beyond sickness, old age, and death, and all that goes in, as T.S. Eliot said, like to enter into that world costs you nothing less than everything. After that dedication, to have the first teaching on generosity is quite extraordinary. And it really brings to my mind, like, what could that mean? That the fruit of insight is generosity. When the Buddha said that nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine, it points toward this sense of the unconditioned self, but it also points toward something relational. Like in the recognition of emptiness, there arises compassion. So we have these two concepts around awakening. It's the concept between the arahant versus the bodhisattva. Now, the bodhisattva tradition, many of us are familiar with that. It's about service. It's about the practice of serving as a means to awakening. The arahant comes a little more, and again, I'm not a scholar here, but my understanding is that the arahant comes more from the kind of the orthodox kind of original practices, which is basically, I'm going to focus on my awakening versus I'm going to focus on service as a way of awakening. So in a way, it's kind of like, let me wake up and get out of here versus let's wake up together. But part of this is like awakening is awakening. So even if your focus is let me awaken, what happens is in the awakening, there is this awakening of the two wings. Wisdom, seeing clearly, compassion or loving presence that arises simultaneously. Hypothetically, I'm not speaking from full awakening experience here. But nonetheless, what this is all about is that when we awaken to truth, we awaken the heart as well. And when you awaken the heart, there is a recognition, the capacity to see self as other and other as self. That is to say, the separation between you and me falls away, and there's the recognition of this shared energetic moment. And from there, compassion opens, compassion explodes when there's no self to get in the way. If you think about a time when you gave someone something and you felt good about it, when you give a gift and it's so received, it's an amazing feeling, isn't it? There's a shift inside when you can kind of sense what someone needs or wants and kind of deliver that. Of course, there's a shadow side to that. Like I really, really do not like giving gifts because there's that whole that whole sense that I'm supposed to find something that you want and need that you don't know that you want and need it, but in giving it to you, then I will demonstrate to you that I know you better than you may know yourself on some level. That's intense pressure. I really don't like going there. But nonetheless, when we can sense what another person needs and extend into their world, it's an amazing feeling. And then to receive that from another, a thoughtful gift, a kind, unexpected word, it's such a powerful shift. So it's a very counterintuitive approach to happiness, to be generous. When you practice generosity, it can move you from this tightly held, fear-based self to one that is more connected and more interdependent. As the saying goes, what you hold on to binds you, and what you can let go sets you free. So that's it. That's it in essence. Let go and feel free. Give of yourself and feel connected. As one of my primary teachers, Swami Kripalu, would say, the key to your heart is found in the heart of another. So generosity, when you take it on as a practice, it becomes an amazing mirror and kind of a mirror of your own selfishness. So, the consciousness of generosity and how it becomes a mirror. I was thinking about this A long, long time ago, I went out for dinner with a friend. Remember going out to dinner with friends in public? Such a distant memory. I'm a really, really simple eater. I'm a plant-based eater, and like anything, there's great vegan food and terrible vegan food, and then occasionally there's terrible vegan food that's way overpriced. And in this dinner, we didn't go crazy. No drinks, no dessert, and I would estimate the cost of the plants on our plates was somewhere between $6 and $7.50, and this rotten meal cost $60. I come from a pretty cheap family, and that's part of my conditioning, and I was more than peeved. I felt ripped off. And of course, as I'm in my reaction phase, my instinct was to express my displeasure by giving a terrible tip. But then fortunately, I saw it. I saw that my own self-righteousness and my own displaced anger was not being directed in the right way. It wasn't the server's fault. I've been really working on training myself to be generous. And part of my practice is I over-tip. When you really tune in to the servers, as I was doing then, like you could look around. Many of them were kind of college-aged. You could see that some of it were just working for the job, and then some of the waiters and waitresses were. You could tell they were like idealistic about being part of this vegan restaurant. They were all nice people. And so I gave a big tip, and I felt better. There's this beautiful teaching of how when you take on generosity as a spiritual practice, there are three benefits. One is just the contemplation of being generous. So just thinking about this really nice waiter, checking the tip and going, wow, that's great. Just anticipating that felt good. And then the act of generosity itself. And now that I look back and I think about that, I feel good about what I did. So, on the other hand, you know what it's like when you feel wronged. When we feel wronged, we really want to take it out on someone. This is beautiful little teaching from the Dhammapada. If by giving up a lesser happiness, one could experience greater happiness, a wise person would renounce the lesser to behold the greater. That's kind of what it's like when we feel wronged. There's a certain kind of happiness we get by expressing it, taking it out on someone. But if we can let go of that lesser happiness and turn to a greater happiness, that's a wise choice. And of course, we don't do it all perfectly. It's all about, in my understanding, this practice of generosity is about training yourself to look for the positive, to look for the good, to move from a tightly bound, self-preservational, self-righteous self to new possibilities. Of course, there's a shadow side to all this. It's not about being passive. It's not about not standing up to bullies and being an advocate for the truth and naming oppression and systemic racism and all that's off in this world. But it's not about being locked down. It's looking about how you can be supportive and generous to those around you. So I find the contemplation of generosity interesting. I've been on some boards, boards of directors, and I know that when you're on a board, you're looking for the 3 W's. You're looking for wealth, wisdom, or work. You're looking for people who, if they've got some life experience that could really support the organization. Or you're looking for those who have the abundance, who can kind of fuel some change. or you're looking for those who are just willing to roll up their sleeves and take action. And I think that's a really wonderful reflection around what you might be able to offer. Is there some kind of wealth that you could offer someone in need? Is there anything you've learned in life that might be supportive to others? Or is there a way that you could roll up your sleeves? So, to be there for someone who needs help, to listen to someone who's struggling, to extend yourself to someone who is not expecting any kindness, really, really juicy. Really, really juicy, as you know. So there's something here as well, though, in training ourselves to give. That's only part of the equation. I've told this story before, but I can't think of a better one. There's a well-known and famous Dharma teacher. And I was fortunate enough to do a retreat with him. And this teacher from college was an inspiration for me. I just loved the way he moved through life, the way he wrote. And he really inspired me, not only to practice, but he inspired me to become a teacher. And so before the retreat, he was coming up to the meditation hall, and I just had to express my gratitude. And so I, caught him on his way in, and I told him what a difference he made in my life. I really kind of poured out my heart, how he inspired me to teach, and how grateful I am for the model that he was for me, because I really did have him as my personal model. And you know what he did? He blew me off. He averted his eyes. He mumbled something kind of incoherent, and to my mind, he kind of like got out of there as soon as he could. I understand there may have been a number of factors here. Maybe he really had to go to the bathroom. Maybe he was running late. Maybe he was worried about a talk that he had to give. Maybe he's like painfully shy and introverted. But my reaction was, screw you. And I found myself feeling really hard-hearted toward him for quite a while. To feel that shut down. And of course, as I was heading into a meditation retreat, I got to sit with it, and I kind of watched my whole story around not being seen, not being heard, not being appreciated, putting myself out, getting shut down, all that stuff. And then the anger and the self-righteousness, and then the role reversal and imagining what he was feeling and all that kind of stuff. And then I realized, how many times have I done that? How many times has someone said something kind to me and I didn't take it in? Either I deflected, or I felt embarrassed, but I did not receive what was offered me. And maybe you've had an experience like that, where you've offered a gift or a compliment and have someone kind of blow it off. So I realized that for me, just like him, I had some trouble taking in and receiving. And in not receiving another person's thanks for gratitude or appreciation, I was kind of denying their existence. Because what I just wanted to be acknowledged. So there's this fantastic book called The Charisma Myth. It's written by a meditator. And it talks a lot about these little behavioral mindfulness strategies. The whole myth of charisma is that you're born with it, when it's really just behavioral stuff. But here's what's offered in the charisma myth, that when someone offers you a compliment, what you do are these steps. You listen. And then when they're done sharing, you pause And it's recommended you pause for 1 full second, which can feel like a long time. Then you let a feeling come up. Then you make eye contact. And then you thank that person directly. It's pretty amazing to listen, pause, let a feeling come up, make eye contact, and then just to say, thank you so much. I really appreciate that coming from you. It's made a big difference for me because I realized that just as I wanted to feel received, it's important for me to receive. It's also challenging to receive. So that becomes a whole live edge unto itself. And I'll talk a little bit more about the kind of the art of receiving, which is all part of completing this cycle of generosity. And so it opens up this question around, it's maybe just not about just being generous, it's about how to receive the generosity expressed to you. So for many, many years, I had a poverty vow and a simplicity vow for about 13 years. And I loved it. Really, really simple. I was in my 20s and 30s, and the whole idea of just serve and trust the universe. And it becomes a real question for me around receiving and taking in now that I no longer have a vowed order. I'm not in a vowed order. I don't have a vow of poverty, a vow of simplicity or anything like that. It's like, how much do I receive from myself and how much do I serve? I don't have kids. I don't want to be a burden. So one of my goals in life is to be able to pay for my own funeral. I would really like to be able to not be a burden as I age. So it becomes a really interesting thing around receiving. And just as much of my life is kind of based on dana, as this talk, for example, is offered utterly freely. And I love that part of this offering because it allows me to be who I am. Practice deeply, offer freely. And then to receive any support, to receive any donations is such a powerful practice for me to really take that in. And there's a very, very interesting little thing here. And it's an interesting study in terms of like your capacity to generate income for yourself. And I don't know how hard this is in terms of its research, but what's suggested is that when you are taking in income just for yourself, there's a certain quality to that. That's you can allow a certain amount in. If you are generating income, let's say for your family, you're making money to help put your kids through college, to support your family members, it's a little bit easier to receive. You can actually receive more income because psychologically it's serving others. And say, for example, if you're raising money for a nonprofit or something like that, it's actually even easier to become more of a conduit for income and for all of the incoming energy that supports you because you're channeling it out to the world. So there's something very interesting here about living a generous life that actually allows you to get more energy kind of flowing through your system. It's a pretty amazing thing. When you think about all the gifts, all the blessings you've had in your life, it's a very powerful shift. So there's a beautiful teaching in here around giving. And it comes back to the middle way. Not too tight, not too loose. And I want to give you kind of two examples. The classic story is about King Ashoka, who was a brutal, ruthless warrior king who converted to the Buddhist teachings and then completely remodeled society based on generosity. And what you'll see now a lot in Southeast Asia is that model where the monks receive no external support, but they are supported generously by the community. and then they in turn serve the community. That the whole practice of dana is really, really quite powerful. If you want to practice meditation in Southeast Asia, you will be fed, you will be clothed, you will be given medicine because you're supported by the community. King Ashoka was so impacted by these teachings on generosity that he decided to be a generous person. And so he had his scribe or personal secretary or whatever record his generous acts. There's something maybe a little egotistical about that. Of course, this is a couple thousand years ago, so who exactly knows what that meant or how much of the story is true. But the story goes that as he was working to give and improve and shift the consciousness of his culture, that he had someone recording what he did. And on his deathbed, he had those deeds read back to him as a reflection of his life. And again, as part of this practice of the pleasure of anticipating generosity, the pleasure of giving, and then the pleasure of reflection. I was so touched by that story that when I was with my dad, who was in his final hours, I told him the story of his life from that view of his generosity. And it was an incredibly powerful experience. My dad had kind of full-blown Alzheimer's. But for whatever reason, and who knows how much of it was my words that he might be able to understand, or just my presence, or just where he was in his life, but he had tears streaming down his eyes. And it was so powerful for me to tell him the story of his life based on his acts of kindness and his generosity. The shadow side of that is that after the death of the Buddha and after the death of King Ashoka, there was sort of a corruption that started to come into this practice of giving. And the teachings started to get swayed. And the teachings began to get a little sticky. There is attachment there, kind of attachment to the results. So the teachings began to become a little tinged with how a small gift now will produce fruit in future lifetimes. There were special appeals for lavish meals, and the monks began to get a little bit attached to the outcome of that generosity. They began to skew their teachings a little more toward the donors who could get special favors by being generous. And even just recently, there's a headline on how there's a whole thing in Thailand of trying to get monks to go on diets. You can look it up. You can Google it. The monks are kind of forbidden to eat after midday. That's part of the practice. After noon, there's no food. And so people kind of been wanting to give to kind of better their karma, offer all kinds of food, and they eat very, very, very well. But also, they're given a lot of sugary drinks. And the monks told researchers, this is wild, the monks told researchers who were involved in this project of studying their weight that they didn't realize they were putting on weight because of the loose-fitting robes. So Professor Jongit and her team came up with a belt with knots to indicate where they thought a healthy waistline should be. They also provide monks with measuring tape divided into 4 colors to indicate various belly sizes. So here we have this balance between giving gifts that are given with a sense of manipulation, of looking for favors, looking for a way to get more, and selfless giving. And I'm always conscious that when I mention these talks and that our retreats are freely offered, there's something in me that doesn't want to mention the whole practice of dana or generosity at all. And then there's something in me that actually likes the security of the dana basket and PayPal. As I've said before, this is a pretty neurotic way to make a living. But what you find out for yourself and what I find out for myself is, how much do I give with no strings attached? How can I receive what is offered freely? How do I manipulate to get more? It's a perfect mirror. It really is. And so it becomes a practice of reflecting on those who've been generous to you. And when I think about all the blessings and all the privilege I've had in my life, I started to think about all the people I never really thanked. All the way from the chair of the English department at El Dorado High School in Albuquerque, New Mexico, who hid my file in the main office so that he could hire me for my first job, to all those who supported me as a teacher, to the support of IMCW, the support of all the good folks at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington who's offered this, to the mindful movement teachers before this class, and to Ray and Tara who offer mindful dialogue, all offering it freely. This is kind of the power of reflecting on all these blessings that we've received. One Dharma teacher was often asked, "I'm so grateful, what can I give?" And he would always respond by saying, "Practice with sincerity and diligence." And he knew that the gift of their practice would be the greatest benefit of all. And that's certainly what I most hope for, is that these practices in some way may touch you, that your cup might be full, that you might touch others. And just to say, and we'll close with a short meditation, that your support for this talk supports me in what I do. I'm immensely grateful. It means I'll get to pay for my own funeral, but it also means I can support people in my practice. So receiving is an edge for me. It's receiving for myself, but also for me to know that I intend to share what I receive with others. And one of the beautiful things about moving this talk onto this platform of live streaming is so many people from around the world now who tune in and listen to these talks. And I can't but pause to, recently I was just touched by Mohsin, who sent a note saying, checking in from Pakistan, "I watch your videos every morning with my coffee." So, Mohsin, cheers, blessings. I thought I might end with a short little reading and a short reflection. If you like, you can close your eyes. And you might take 3 slow, deep breaths. Once there were 2 brothers who inherited their father's land. The brothers divided the land in half, and each one farmed his own section. Over time, the older brother married and had 6 children, while the younger brother never married. One night, the younger brother lay awake. "It's not fair that each of us has half the land to farm," he thought. "My brother has 6 children to feed, and I have none. He should have more grain than I do." So that night, the younger brother went to his silo, gathered a large bundle of wheat, and climbed the hill that separated the 2 farms and over to his brother's farm. Leaving the wheat in his brother's silo, the younger brother returned home, feeling pleased. Earlier that very same night, the older brother was also lying awake. "It's not fair that each of us has half the land to farm," he thought. "In my old age, my wife and I will have our grown children to take care of us, not to mention grandchildren, while my brother will probably have no one. He should at least sow more grain from the fields now so he can provide for himself with dignity in his old age." So that night, too, he secretly gathered a large bundle of wheat, climbed the hill, left it in his brother's silo, and returned home, feeling pleased. The next morning, the younger brother was surprised to see the amount of grain in his barn unchanged. I must not have taken as much wheat as I thought, he said. Tonight, I'll be sure to take more. That very same moment, his older brother was also standing in his own barn, musing much the same thoughts. After night fell, each brother gathered a greater amount of wheat from his barn and in the dark secretly delivered it to the brother's barn. The next morning, the brothers were again puzzled and perplexed. How can I be mistaken? There's the same amount of grain here as there was before I cleared the pile for my brother. This is impossible. Tonight, I'll make no mistake. I'll take the pile down to the very floor, and that way I'll be sure the grain gets delivered. The third night, more determined than ever, each brother gathered a large pile of wheat from his barn, loaded onto a cart, and slowly pulled the haul through the fields and up the hill to his brother's barn. At the top of the hill, under the shadow of a moon, each brother noticed a figure in the distance. Who could it be? When the two brothers recognized the form of the other brother and the load he was pulling behind, they realized what had happened. Without a word, they dropped the ropes to their cart and embraced. You might take a few moments now again to slow down and deepen your breath. You might bring into mind someone who right now that you know may be struggling or suffering in some way. And as you breathe, you might just sense, as you reflect on this person, what does it feel like inside? Is there a sense of how you might make a generous offering? If you were to reach out in some way, what would that feel like? What would that be like inside? The Buddha said, if people knew as I know the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would they allow the stain of stinginess to obsess them and take root in their minds. Take a moment to sense the possibility of cultivating a generous heart. And imagine at the same time as you might train yourself to give, that you might train yourself to receive. To remember the blessings that you have received in this life and the blessings and the mystery of being alive. As you're ready, you can deepen the breath. And as you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I am so personally grateful to be able to offer these practices and these teachings, to take the time to reflect on what these teachings mean for me. It's just the best game in town. May you and your generous heart have a wonderful time from here on. I look forward to being with you again.